I was born and raised in a quiet suburb of New York City. My parents were ordinary people. My father was a serious, quiet man, and my mother was quite the chatterbox. We weren't rich, nor were we particularly strict or overly lenient. My family was more on the nosy side, but they weren't overbearing. It was just a typical household. Our home was convenient for getting into the city, but also close to forests and farmland. With my pale skin, blonde hair, and soft features, I had what you'd call a classic American look. As a kid, I was always insecure and shy. I wasn't the kind of person to hang out with a big group of friends. I spent most of my time quietly with a few close friends at a small park near the foot of a hill. Despite being a quiet kid, I always had a secret dream of living abroad. It started when I watched a children's show about life in another country. There was a bright, beautiful girl with black hair living in a colorful world, and it fascinated me. I wanted to wear colorful, flashy clothes, but I didn't think I could pull it off. I saw myself as too plain. I imagined myself in that colorful world, living vigorously through the characters on TV. As I grew older, I dreamed of moving abroad and seeing the world, but I kept those dreams to myself, never sharing them with anyone. Then, when I turned 12, my mom told me something that changed everything.
"You're going to have a baby brother, Emily."
I was thrilled. I had always been an only child, and I longed for a sibling. My parents were excited too, constantly telling me,
"You'll be a big sister now. You need to start doing things on your own."
I was already pretty independent, rarely relying on my parents. But when my baby brother Jake was born, my parents doted on him. They still loved me, of course, but the attention they gave baby Jake felt very different from what I received. Jake grew up showered with love and care. Seeing him grow up, I focused on becoming independent and studying hard. I studied on my own without tutoring or extra classes and managed to pass all my exams. Jake was lively and full of energy, constantly getting into minor accidents or trouble. I, on the other hand, was low maintenance, so my parents seemed relieved. After graduating from a local high school, I got into a national university. I was still insecure, especially when it came to dating, so I never had a boyfriend, but otherwise, things were smooth. After college, I landed a job at a major company. During my interviews, I expressed a desire to work at an international office. But of course, I had to start in the US first. 3 years later, my hard work paid off, and I was finally transferred overseas. I had worked tirelessly and was recognized for my efforts, so I was thrilled. My new office was in a beautiful town surrounded by nature. It was peaceful, yet close enough to the city that it was convenient to get around. The locals were incredibly kind to me, and I felt myself becoming more outgoing. Unexpectedly, I became popular among the local men because of my blonde hair. I kept in touch with my family over video calls, but my mom was always pestering me with questions.
"So, do you have a boyfriend yet? If you marry a local, it'll be an international marriage, right? That sounds tough. Make sure to introduce him before you get serious."
Her nagging got on my nerves, so I limited my contact with my parents. From what my parents told me, Jake was growing into a smart, capable young man. He was doing well in school, talking about studying abroad or attending an international university. And one day, my mom called me out of the blue.
"Can you look after Jake for us?"
Jake had been accepted to a university in the city near where I was living. It wasn't far. He could easily ride his bike to school. I worried about living with a younger brother, but Jake himself said,
"I'd appreciate your help."
So I agreed. For a few years, Jake and I lived together, but it wasn't exactly like we were the closest of siblings. He often stayed at friends' places or ate out, and our relationship was more like friendly roommates. Eventually, Jake graduated from college.
"Thanks, sis, for everything. You've always been my role model, and I'll keep working hard like you."
With those words, Jake returned to the US and landed a job at a major American company. Being fluent in a foreign language, he became highly valued, and I knew he was on the fast track to success. Around that time, I was nearing 35. My parents had been asking about boyfriends and marriage, but after I turned 30, they stopped bringing it up. I was actually relieved. After reflecting on my life, I decided to quit my job. I loved living abroad and working, surrounded by beautiful landscapes and a relaxed lifestyle, but I had new dreams to pursue. I moved back to a quiet rural town in the US and started a new life. My parents were shocked when I visited and told them I'd quit my job.
"Emily, you're back in the US? And you quit your job? What happened?"
I calmly replied, "Don't worry, I'm doing something new now." But this is my life, and I'd appreciate it if you let me figure it out. My parents were stunned and didn't say anything. From that point on, they stopped asking me questions and gave me the space I needed. A few years later, when I was 40, Jake called with big news.
I'm getting married. Her name's Maria and she's amazing. We work at the same company.
Mom was over the moon telling me all about Maria, who was apparently part Spanish and incredibly beautiful.
She's so sweet, Emily. They came to visit us the other day and she was such a lady.
I listened to Mom rave about Maria, nodding along. That's great news, I said. Maybe I'll meet someone too. Mom quickly added,
I didn't call to pressure you, Emily. You're perfect the way you are. Marriage isn't everything. Just be happy, okay?
Mom's words were rushed, but I appreciated her support. I took her kindness to heart and let the subject drop. Jake and Maria had already introduced each other to their families and had a wedding date set, but with their busy schedules, they weren't planning a ceremony anytime soon. When I asked Jake about meeting Maria's parents, he said,
We met them at a hotel. They live in the city, but I haven't been to their house yet. They were lovely people, though.
My mom had invited Jake and Maria over for dinner to celebrate their marriage, but they declined, saying they were too busy. Eventually, Jake and Maria got married and moved into a fancy apartment in the heart of the city. Working at a major company, they clearly had no financial worries. According to Mom, they traveled frequently and dined at expensive restaurants. It seemed more like they were living it up than working hard, but I kept my thoughts to myself. There was one thing that concerned me, though. One day, while talking to Jake on the phone, I casually mentioned, You two seem to be doing a lot of traveling. You're like a power couple. That must be fun. Jake's tone darkened.
Power couple? Maria's changed a bit since we got married.
What do you mean? Is everything okay?
She used to work really hard, but lately I feel like the burden's on me. But I guess that's just how it goes. We're making it work.
He didn't sound confident. A year after their wedding, my mom called me again with exciting news.
We're finally having a family dinner to celebrate Jake and Maria's marriage.
I hadn't seen Jake in a while, and I was excited to meet Maria. My parents had only glowing things to say about her, so I expected her to be wonderful. On the day of the dinner, I wore a simple blouse and did my makeup lightly. My dad had ordered expensive sushi and was clearly thrilled. When I met Maria, she was just as beautiful and sweet as my parents had described. Emily, I'm so happy to finally meet you. She greeted me with a warm hug. Maria was the complete opposite of me. She has striking features and flawless makeup. She was part Spanish and her manners were refined and polite. My parents watched with smiles.
You two look like you'll get along great.
The dinner started off in a cheerful mood. Despite never having spent time with my parents before, Maria quickly charmed them with her gentle demeanor. Jake works so hard and I want to do my best too. Maria was on a path to promotion, according to my mom, who said Jake was doing incredibly well at work. He had achieved record sales and was promoted at an unusually young age. Judging by their lifestyle, they were doing quite well. Maria was wearing an elegant designer dress and expensive jewelry. I've never been great at work, but recently I closed a big deal with an overseas client, and I'm so close to finalizing a few more contracts. I'll pass my next performance review and get that promotion for sure. Maria beamed with pride, and my family smiled as they listened to her.
Jake travels a lot for work. You must be under a lot of pressure, Maria.
I'm so lucky to have Jake. I've never been great at sales, but he's made sure I live comfortably. I'm really lucky. Maria flashed a smile at Jake, who barely nodded in response. My parents didn't seem to notice his discomfort.
Good to know you're doing well. I heard you two were thinking about moving. What's the plan? We were debating whether to buy a house or not, but we decided to buy a penthouse in the city.
Maria smiled excitedly at Jake's words. I've always dreamed of living in a penthouse. It's something I could never afford on my own, but thanks to Jake, it's finally coming true. Maria fidgeted with joy as she spoke. My parents and I were surprised by the news. A penthouse? That must be really expensive. Are you sure Jake can afford that? I remembered seeing the building online. It was a luxury property. This has been my dream forever. Our current salaries make it tight, but once I get promoted, we'll be fine. Jake's working so hard to make my dream come true.
I just want to support Maria's dream. We'll make it work.
My parents accepted their decision.
Well, Jake, you've got a lot of work ahead of you then.
As the meal continued, I stood up to make some tea. I'll make some tea, Mom. Mind if I use the kitchen? I headed to the kitchen and Maria followed. I'll help. Maria is so thoughtful, my dad said, and I had to agree. But as soon as we were alone in the kitchen, Maria's demeanor changed completely. So, you got fired from your overseas job, huh? And now you're back here in the middle of nowhere? That's hilarious. Jake looked up to you, but you're not who I thought you'd be. You must be living in some rundown old house, right? You're not even married yet, right? It's kind of embarrassing, don't you think? I froze in place, shocked at Maria's harsh words. Also, what's with your looks? You don't take care of yourself at all. No one would believe you're Jake's sister. I wouldn't introduce you to anyone. Maria, who had been so sweet earlier, was now attacking me out of nowhere. Wait, what's wrong? Did something you ate upset your stomach? Maybe it was the sushi? Sushi? It wasn't as good as you said. Don't serve me bad food. Maria downed a glass of water as if to cleanse herself. Did you marry Jake for love? I asked, trying to understand. Oh, I always planned to marry an elite guy and live a comfortable life. That's why I joined the company in the first place. I'm smart, aren't I? And being part Spanish gave me an advantage. She didn't seem ashamed at all. I have Jake to thank for this amazing life, and I guess I have you to thank too, since you helped him out in college. But let's be clear, you're still single, right? Don't even think about relying on us in the future. She winked at me, taking my hand in hers. Once we get that penthouse, everything will be perfect. It was a bit of a stretch, but once I get promoted, we'll be fine. Have fun in your little country life while we live it up. I couldn't stay quiet any longer. That's enough. Does Jake even know who you really are? I won't stand by while you deceive him. You're not my sister-in-law. I don't accept you. That's rich coming from you. I want nothing to do with you either. Let's just cut ties completely. Don't expect us to take care of you in your old age. You'll regret this, Maria. Just then, the kettle whistled loudly. Maria poured the boiling water into cups, her demeanor flipping back. I'll serve the tea. Sorry for the wait, everyone. I watched her walk back to the table, coldly eyeing her from behind. The rest of the evening passed without incident, though I kept silent. Thank you so much for having us today, Mr. and Mrs. Daniels. Goodbye, Emily. Goodbye. A few days later, I noticed dozens of missed calls on my phone. I had been at work all day, so I hadn't checked my personal phone. The next morning, the calls started again bright and early. Hello? I answered, groggy and rubbing my eyes. This is all your fault. I was so close to my promotion, but the company just canceled it. We bought the penthouse, and the loan payments are starting soon. How could you do this to us? Maria screamed. I grimaced and held the phone away from my ear. Who is this? I don't have a sister-in-law. Don't play dumb. Why didn't you tell me you were running a company? If I'd known, I wouldn't have treated you like that. In fact, during my time overseas, I had met and started dating a man named Kevin, a Japanese-American businessman. Kevin and his business partner, John, ran a company together, and they had plans to expand. When we were dating, Kevin had told me,
I think we should expand the company. John will stay here, and I'll move to the US with you. Let's live in your hometown together.
His words made me rethink my life, and I decided to return to the US with him. After we moved back, we bought a house just outside the city and started building our life together. Kevin was the CEO, so we often had guests over, which made the big house worthwhile. As Kevin worked on expanding the company, I launched my own business. I started an online store selling imported goods, furniture, accessories, and clothes. I'd always loved colorful international styles, so this was my way of embracing that childhood dream. I ran the business from home, but I'd wear bold international style makeup during video meetings, so no one would recognize me from my everyday life. Just as Kevin and I were about to get married, I heard about Jake's wedding. I wanted to tell my mom about my engagement, but she was so focused on my single status that I didn't have the heart to bring it up. In the end, Kevin and I got married before I had a chance to tell my family. It wasn't until Jake and Maria had been married for almost a year that I first met Maria in a business setting. I had seen her name and photo before, so I recognized her immediately. Even though I could tell Maria wasn't a great salesperson, I decided to help her out of family loyalty. We signed a small contract, and Maria seemed thrilled. I even introduced her to Kevin and John, hoping to help her land a bigger deal. But then Maria's true colors showed, and everything changed. We were so close to closing the deal, but now it's all ruined. How am I supposed to live my dream life in the penthouse if I can't even get promoted? I need fancy clothes and jewelry. What am I going to do now?" Maria's voice was shrill over the phone. I responded calmly. "You're the one who wanted to cut ties, remember? I'm just following your lead." "But you didn't have to cut ties with everyone. I'm the one who introduced you to that company." "You said we're done, Maria. My husband's decisions are his own." "Well, Jake will just have to work even harder. Maybe I'll quit my job and rely on him. Or maybe I should have aimed for somewhere richer." As Maria rambled, a male voice interrupted.
"Maria, stop."
I brought the phone closer to my ear. "Jake? I thought you were on a business trip. Why are you back?"
"I heard about the promotion cancellation and got worried, so I came home early. I heard everything, Maria. You were talking on the phone and I heard it all."
Jake's voice was calm but firm. "No, Jake, wait. I was just upset. I didn't mean any of it."
"Yeah, I've had my doubts for a while. You started buying more and more after we got married. I wanted to believe in us, but I can't anymore. Let's sell the penthouse and go our separate ways."
"Wait, what? You're divorcing me? Please, Jake, don't do this." Maria's voice was filled with desperation. The phone went silent and I could hear her sobbing on the other end. Maria had married Jake for his success, but in the end she lost everything. Her husband, her dreams, her home. She quit her job shortly after Jake asked for a divorce. Maria's hometown wasn't the glamorous city she had pretended it to be. She had grown up on a small island far from the city life she had claimed. She had even rented a hotel room to impress Jake's parents during their first meeting. But despite all her efforts to live like a celebrity, it all fell apart. I, on the other hand, found joy in simple things like the vast, open landscapes of the countryside. It was a reminder that what we desire is often very different from what others seek. A year later, Jake and Maria's divorce was finalized.
"I'm sorry, Emily. Maria caused you so much trouble. I'm really sorry for dragging you into all of this."
I felt bad for Jake. Even though Maria had declared she wanted nothing to do with me, I knew the cracks in their marriage had been there all along. Luckily, they hadn't been able to move into the penthouse or start paying off the huge loan. After Jake's divorce was settled, I finally told my family about my marriage. It was a bit late, but I explained why I hadn't told them earlier. They were shocked, but happy for me. When I invited them to our new home, they were blown away. We all had a good laugh about it. Dreams and goals vary from person to person, and they can change over time. Some people want to expand their businesses. Others want children or a bigger house or maybe even more money. It's important to chase those dreams, but never at the expense of others. Being consumed by greed and pretending to be someone else will only lead to disaster. I realized the importance of being grateful for what you have and finding happiness in the small things in life.
I'm Sharon.